In a surprising and reflective moment, Taylor Swift's ex-boyfriend Joe Jonas has broken a nearly two-decade-long silence, offering rare public comments about his brief but highly publicized romantic history with the global pop icon. The split, which occurred 17 years ago in 2008 when both were teenagers navigating the intense glare of newfound fame, has long been a subject of fan speculation and media lore. Jonas's remarks, made during a candid interview, suggest a perspective softened by time and maturity, as he looked back on the relationship and its tumultuous end, which was famously memorialized in Swift's song Forever and Always. This unexpected reflection provides a new, nostalgic chapter to one of the earliest and most defining narratives in Taylor Swift's career, highlighting the vast distance both artists have traveled since their youthful romance ignited tabloid headlines. The conversation unfolded in the comfortable, conversational setting of an Esquire interview, where Joe, now 36, was seated alongside his brothers and bandmates, Kevin and Nick, the familiar dynamic of the Jonas brothers providing a layer of casual support. When the topic inevitably drifted to his famous ex, the 35-year-old music titan Taylor Swift, the question landed in their midst, shifting the atmosphere from one of light-hearted camaraderie to a more measured and reflective space. With the careful consideration of a man who has long been in the public eye, Joe addressed the subject, his response filtered through the lens of not just his own experience but the shared history of the entire group, who had all been peripherally caught in the whirlwind of that relationship and its very public ending so many years earlier. The conversation took a more pointed turn when Joe, whose own romantic history has remained inextricably linked to Taylor's, particularly given his subsequent marriage and recent divorce from her friend, actress Sophie Turner, was posed a direct and potentially delicate question about the superstar's latest artistic chapter, the Tortured Poets Department. Navigating this minefield of public perception and personal history, Joe offered a diplomatic, carefully measured response. "I've heard some of it," he began, immediately establishing a casual, non-committal distance before acknowledging her unparalleled status. "I think she's obviously the biggest artist out there, and I think it's good." He then masterfully generalized his opinion, stating, "Everybody's got an opinion about it," before landing on a safe, musically technical compliment that sidestepped any deeper lyrical analysis. "But from what I've heard, there are some catchy melodies." In doing so, he acknowledged her work without fueling the speculation about his role in its inspiration, a testament to the maturity and media savvy developed over 17 years in the spotlight. The recent diplomatic remarks from Joe Jonas arrive 17 years after the genesis of their public narrative, a stark contrast to the raw, immediate fallout following their 2008 breakup. That initial chapter was famously defined by Taylor Swift's candid appearance on The Ellen DeGeneres Show, where she did not shy away from airing her grievances, playfully participating in a now iconic segment where Ellen facilitated a prank call and Taylor good-naturedly recounted the brevity of their relationship and the infamous 27-second phone call that ended it. This television moment became legendary, cementing the breakup in pop culture lore and providing direct fuel for the heartbreak anthems that would follow, a world away from Joe's current carefully measured praise of the Tortured Poets Department's catchy melodies. His present-day comments, offered alongside his brothers and filtered through the lens of media wisdom and personal growth, highlight the vast distance traveled from that initial, very public airing of teenage heartbreak to the subdued, respectful acknowledgments between two global icons today, closing a loop on one of modern pop music's most enduring and evolving stories. Joe Jonas's recent, diplomatically cautious praise of Taylor Swift's The Tortured Poets Department, where he acknowledged her status as the biggest artist and noted the catchy melodies he'd heard, stands in stark, quiet contrast to the fiery origins of their story 17 years prior. This modern moment of reconciliation is inextricably linked to the seismic pop culture event of 2008, when a young Taylor Swift, seated across from Ellen DeGeneres, famously channeled her fresh heartbreak into a defining public statement. With a blend of wit and wounded pride, she solidified the breakup's lore by declaring she wasn't going to remember the boy who broke up with me over the phone in 27 seconds when I was 18. That iconic quote, replayed endlessly, did more than just air a grievance, it crafted a foundational narrative of resilience that would catapult her songwriting into a new stratosphere of fame and scrutiny. Now, years later, Joe's measured words serve as a subtle, full-circle epilogue to that explosive beginning, a testament to how time and towering success can transform a personal wound, once so vividly captured in a 27-second story, into a distant, respectfully acknowledged part of history. Joe Jonas's recent, diplomatically cautious praise of Taylor Swift's The Tortured Poets Department, where he acknowledged her status as the biggest artist and noted the catchy melodies, was not the only personal territory navigated during the interview with his brothers. The conversation, already layered with the ghost of a 2008 phone call that launched a million headlines, inevitably turned to his current life, with questions arising about his romantic status just over a year after his divorce from Sophie Turner was finalized. When asked if he was currently dating, Joe demonstrated the same carefully calibrated neutrality he employed when discussing his famous ex's music, deftly sidestepping any definitive revelation to maintain a veil of privacy around his personal affairs. This dual line of questioning, probing both his distant past with Swift and his immediate present post-Turner, created a poignant full-circle moment, framing Joe Jonas as a man continually navigating the complex intersection of his personal history and his public persona, all while demonstrating a hard-won maturity far removed from the boy who once ended a relationship in 27 seconds. In a candid interview with Esquire, Joe Jonas, seated alongside his brothers, found himself navigating a minefield of personal history, from his long past, famously brief romance with Taylor Swift to the more recent finalization of his divorce from Sophie Turner. When the conversation turned from Taylor's latest album, which he diplomatically praised for its catchy melodies, to his current romantic life, Joe was ready with a characteristically polished, yet revealing, deflection. In response to being asked if he was currently dating, he quipped, "5 shows in a row doesn't make it easy to meet someone for coffee." This witty, logistical excuse masterfully concealed any genuine answer while painting a vivid picture of his present reality, a life consumed by the demanding schedule of a global tour and the profound responsibilities of single fatherhood. The remark served as a perfect, full-circle counterpoint to the narrative that has followed him for 17 years, no longer the boy of the 27-second phone call, but a man whose life is now dictated by professional commitments and private priorities, leaving little room for the coffee dates that spark new beginnings. Amid a reflective interview that saw Joe Jonas cautiously navigating questions about Taylor Swift's latest album and the 17-year-old ghost of a 27-second phone call, the conversation inevitably turned to his present, post-divorce life. When asked about dating, the father of two first deflected with the logistical excuse of a grueling tour schedule, noting that 5 shows in a row doesn't make it easy to meet someone for coffee. He initially claimed a complete departure from modern romance, stating he was not on dating apps, before catching his own semantic loophole with a moment of self-awareness. "I guess Instagram and TikTok are apps," he conceded, "and I've met people that way." This measured, almost reluctant admission peeled back a layer on the reality of dating for a global celebrity, a world where traditional apps are eschewed, but the vast, interconnected digital campfire of social media remains an unavoidable, if complicated, conduit for connection, framing Joe as a man carefully stepping back into the romantic world on his own uniquely complex terms. Joe Jonas's recent, carefully measured comments to Esquire, where he diplomatically praised Taylor Swift's catchy melodies and deflected questions about his dating life, are just the latest chapter in a public narrative that began with a 27-second phone call in 2008. This history was punctuated earlier this year when Joe left a cryptic response, such as a comment or a social media like, on the lyrics from Taylor's vault track Mr. Perfectly Fine, a song widely speculated to be about their teenage split. That subtle, digital gesture, easily dismissed yet loaded with meaning, demonstrated a newfound willingness to quietly engage with their shared past, a stark contrast to both Taylor's famous proclamation on Ellen that she wouldn't remember the boy who broke up with her and his own current, interview-safe answers. Together, these moments paint a portrait of a man who, 17 years on, is no longer the villain of a breakup anthem but a complex figure carefully navigating the shadow of his own history, using a mix of witty deflection, vague praise, and the occasional, enigmatic online signal to acknowledge a past that the world has never let him, or her, fully forget. The long and winding history between Joe Jonas and Taylor Swift, which erupted publicly in 2008 with a 27-second phone call and her subsequent declaration on Ellen, has evolved into a modern saga of subtle gestures and meticulously parsed public appearances. This was epitomized earlier this year when Joe uploaded a TikTok video in April, presenting a seemingly casual yet deliberately curated image of himself strolling through the streets of London while sporting a sharp grey suit. To the trained eye of fans and pop culture sleuths, this was far from an innocuous clip. It was a visual statement loaded with potential subtext, arriving amid speculation about songs like Mr. Perfectly Fine from her vault. This sartorial choice, projecting an image of composed maturity and moving on, functioned as his unique language of response, a wordless retort to the past that stands in stark contrast to his recent verbal diplomacy in interviews, where he praised her albums, catchy melodies, and deflected questions about his love life. From a teenage breakup that sparked an anthem to a grown man's cryptic TikTok and carefully neutral quotes, their story has transformed from a dramatic headline into a nuanced, 17-year-long dialogue conducted through lyrics, likes, and the subtle power of a well-tailored suit. The intricate, 17-year dance of public and private illusion between Joe Jonas and Taylor Swift found its most perfectly ambiguous climax not in a formal interview, but in the comments section of a TikTok. After Joe posted a video of himself strolling through London in a sharp grey suit, a visual that fans instantly connected to the Fearless Vault lyric, so dignified in his well-pressed suit, the stage was set for a revelation. When a fan directly quoted the line, Joe responded with a plain, unreadable, "Thanks for noticing." This masterfully neutral two-word reply became the ultimate Rorschach test. It left the world wondering if he was knowingly, playfully acknowledging the reference and his place in her musical canon, or if he was simply a man politely thanking someone for a compliment on his attire, entirely unaware of the lyrical echo. In that moment, Joe demonstrated a consummate understanding of modern celebrity, where the power no longer lies in confirming or denying, but in maintaining the mystery, allowing the past and present to coexist in a single, perfectly pressed, and endlessly debated enigma. 17-year saga of public illusions and carefully parsed words between Joe Jonas and Taylor Swift has now reached its most definitive, and perhaps most poetic, conclusion. While Joe's cryptic TikTok and his diplomatically neutral interview comments, praising the catchy melodies of the Tortured Poets Department, kept the embers of their ancient history smoldering, Taylor herself has decisively turned the page. On August 26, she and Travis Kelce announced their engagement in a joint social media post, an act that shifts her narrative irrevocably forward. This joyful proclamation cast Joe's recent reflections, and the entire fan-fueled speculation around his well-pressed suit, into a new, final light, no longer a lingering what-if, but a fully resolved and distant prologue. The chapter that began with a 27-second phone call when she was 18 has now been gracefully closed, not with a retaliatory lyric, but with a diamond ring and a public commitment, finally allowing the boy from the past to fade into the background as the man of her future steps into the spotlight. The intricate, 17-year saga of public illusions between Joe Jonas and Taylor Swift has now been framed with a sense of final, forward-moving purpose. While Joe's cryptic TikTok and diplomatically neutral interview comments, praising the catchy melodies of the Tortured Poets Department, kept the embers of their ancient history smoldering into the summer, Taylor's world was already pivoting toward a new, permanent chapter. The engagement announcement to Travis Kelce on August 26 was not a spontaneous event but the culmination of a deeply intentional plan. The subsequent revelation in September by his friend, comedian Andrew Santino, that the proposal had been months in the making, confirms that during the very period fans were dissecting Joe's every word and sartorial choice, Taylor and Travis were quietly orchestrating their future. This timeline casts Joe's reflections not as a lingering subplot, but as a nostalgic epilogue to a story that had already found its definitive conclusion, rendering the boy of the 27-second phone call a distant memory against the man who spent months carefully planning a proposal. The long-running, public narrative that once hinged on a 27-second phone call between teenagers has now found its profound and deliberate counterpoint. While Joe Jonas navigated questions about Taylor Swift's album and his own dating life this summer, the foundational truth of Taylor's present was being laid elsewhere. As revealed in September by the 41-year-old comedian Andrew Santino on the Pardon My Take podcast, the Kansas City Chiefs star Travis Kelce had first confided his engagement plans months earlier, placing the genesis of this life-changing decision squarely in the spring. This timeline creates a striking parallel. At the very moment fans were dissecting Joe's cryptic TikTok of a well-pressed suit and his polite, distant praise for the Tortured Poets Department, Travis was meticulously planning a proposal, and Taylor was unknowingly on the cusp of a new beginning. The fleeting, digital echoes of a 2008 breakup were thus permanently eclipsed by the steady, real-world commitment of a future husband, closing a 17-year-old chapter not with a bitter lyric, but with a ring that had been thoughtfully in the works all along. The entire, intricately woven saga, from the 27-second phone call in 2008 that sparked a decade and a half of musical lore, to Joe Jonas's recent diplomatic interviews and cryptic social media posts, has now been cast in the clarifying light of a love story long in the making. The revelation from Travis Kelce's friend, comedian Andrew Santino, on the Pardon My Take podcast, provides the definitive context that shifts this history from a lingering echo to a closed chapter. Santino's specific recollection that, "We had golfed together in like April or May, and yeah, he said he was doing it. But he didn't say when," confirms that during the very spring Joe Jonas was perhaps unknowingly invoking old lyrics with a well-pressed suit and cautiously acknowledging catchy melodies. Travis Kelce was already quietly sharing his intention to propose. This timeline reveals that while the public and press were still parsing the subtle gestures of a past relationship, Taylor Swift's present and future were being securely built upon a foundation of private planning and unwavering commitment, finally allowing the boy who broke up with her in 27 seconds to fully recede into the backdrop of a life that had joyfully and decisively moved on. The 17-year narrative that began with the very public, hastily executed sting of a 27-second phone call between teenagers has now found its perfect, private antithesis. While Joe Jonas's recent, diplomatically cautious comments about Taylor Swift's music and his own cryptic social media posts kept the embers of their ancient history smoldering in the public eye, a far more significant story was being meticulously orchestrated away from the spotlight. In a move of profound symbolic weight, Travis Kelce reserved the very day of Taylor's guest appearance on his New Heights podcast as the date for his romantic gesture. This deliberate timing transformed a professional collaboration into the setting for the most personal of commitments, seamlessly uniting their two worlds. The chapter that was opened by a boy breaking up with her over the phone in less than half a minute has now been gracefully and definitively closed by a man who planned a proposal for months, choosing a date that celebrated their partnership in every sense, proving that some stories are not defined by their dramatic beginnings, but by their thoughtful, dignified, and long-awaited happy endings. The 17-year narrative that began with the very public, hastily executed sting of a 27-second phone call between teenagers has now found its perfect, private antithesis. While Joe Jonas's recent, diplomatically cautious comments about Taylor Swift's music and his own cryptic social media posts kept the embers of their ancient history smoldering in the public eye, a far more significant story was being meticulously orchestrated away from the spotlight. As revealed by Travis Kelce's friend, the NFL star had first shared his engagement plans as early as spring, and in the ensuing months, the power couple successfully guarded their joyous secret. This culminated in Travis carefully orchestrating every detail before finally getting down on one knee, an act of profound and private intention that stands in stark, poetic contrast to the impulsive, distant manner that once defined the end of her story with Jonas. The chapter that was opened by a boy breaking up with her over the phone in less than half a minute has now been gracefully and definitively closed by a man who planned a proposal for months, proving that some stories are not defined by their dramatic beginnings, but by their thoughtful, dignified, and long-awaited happy endings. The 17-year narrative that began with the very public, hastily executed sting of a 27-second phone call has now found its perfect, private antithesis in a proposal of military-grade precision and heartfelt symbolism. While Joe Jonas's recent, diplomatically cautious comments about Taylor Swift's music kept the embers of their ancient history smoldering, Travis Kelce was meticulously orchestrating a future that would render the past obsolete. In a beautifully executed plan, he reserved the day of Taylor's guest appearance on his New Heights podcast for the proposal itself. As Travis kept his now wife-to-be busy with filming, a dedicated team secretly descended upon his home garden to transform it into a breathtaking setting for the question that would change everything. This clandestine operation, running parallel to a public professional engagement, was the ultimate act of devotion, a seamless merging of their collaborative public life and their intimate private world. The chapter that was opened by a boy ending things over the phone in less than half a minute has now been gracefully and definitively closed by a man who, with immense care and forethought, turned a day of work into a lifetime of commitment, proving that the most powerful stories are those that are carefully written not with words, but with actions.